Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick with another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. Today's guest is Mark Baker, who is the farmer at Baker's Green Acres in Marion, Michigan. Now, they produce pork, chicken, and other farm products, offer poultry processing, and educate farmers through on-farm classes and their popular YouTube channel. Now, Mark is on the podcast today to discuss his interactions with government officials over his selling of different products in the state of Michigan. He shares his story, which I do not wish on any of you, and it's definitely a cautionary tale to make sure that you do know your rights and have someone in your corner batting for you. He also shares some success stories of people he's worked with that have had some great outcomes to their interactions. Now, a quick disclaimer that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Mark belong solely to Mark and not necessarily to the Thriving Farmer Podcast or a parent company in the field media. Join me in welcoming Mark to the podcast. All right. So, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So talk to me a little bit about your background. How did you get into farming?
I was active duty Air Force, and my wife and I got tired of living in base housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started looking around for some place to live that it was out a little ways from the base, and we found an old farm. And it was only 13 acres, and the land had been sold off, but the house was still there. And so we bought it, moved in, and somewhere along the way we got chickens, and then that was the kind of gateway to other things. We wound up getting some pigs and finally got some calves to raise, and we did a garden as well. So we were kind of becoming self-sufficient before it was even trendy. It was just something that we kind of did. We homeschool our kids, so I was gone during the day, and then I was gone for deployments and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just a good, safe place to live, and my kids learned stuff. And when I would come home, I would just say, why can't life be this way?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it all starts with chickens. I mean, for so many people, it's that gateway drug to a more fulfilling farm career.
Yeah. Well, when I got out, I retired after 20 years in the Air Force, and when I got out, I was 43 years old, and I needed something to do, and we just said, why don't we see if we can do this? Why can't we farm? And we came to this community, I'm in northern Michigan, and my wife's parents live here, and we had come here quite a bit on vacations and stuff, and it's a nice place. I'm from New England, but there was land available here, and we found this place online actually, and then came and looked at it and put a down payment on it, and then I retired about a year later, and we moved in.
Cool. So talk to me, what does your farming operation consist of now? I know you do a couple different animals, processing, lay out kind of what you offer.
Well, this is where we are now, but it's not really where we started. I think everything kind of revolves around the butcher shop.
Okay.
So we raise a lot of pastured poultry, and then we process it here ourselves. We raise a lot of Mangalitsa pigs, and we process now most of them here.
Okay.
Sometimes some of them have to go off to USDA plants to be done, for certain applications. And we milk I have about 5 milk cows.
Okay.
And we breed them with a beef variety. So then their calves, we graze them with their moms, and then they're utilized for our beef supply. And we sell some of that, not a whole lot. I've got 8 kids, so we have a group to feed here all the time.
Yeah.
we do sell milk. We sell raw milk. We sell a lot of pastured poultry, and we sell a lot of pork.
Mm-hmm.
I have about 50 acres of hay that I cut every year, so that's kind of a big project to keep my cows going. I also feed it to my pigs.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not that big, really. We could be a lot bigger, and I think we used to be a lot bigger, but we've just kind of toned it down a little bit. And I think we're probably going to get into the reasons why as the interview
Mm-hmm.
goes on. But
Mm-hmm.
so that's where we are now.
Gotcha. Talk
Yeah.
to me about the pork breed, because you got a special breed, and there's actually a big story behind, your involvement with the government over this breed.
Yeah. So back in 2009, a fella approached me and wanted to know if I would be interested in contract growing a certain type of pig. And I wasn't too interested in doing it because the pork market is pretty tough.
Mm-hmm.
You're up against factory farmed pork, and so the price differential is just so difficult that we didn't have much luck with it. So I wasn't interested in really doing it, but I got to go to a workshop on this particular pig out in Seattle. And there's a lot of enthusiasm around this new pig that they were bringing into the States and all this. And so the guy was willing to pay me to do it. And so I said, sure, I'll do it. And so then over about the next couple of years, a lot of people just kept coming to me about this pig. And I quickly became like the guy that had all the answers to this pig. I really wasn't that guy, but I was getting asked the questions. And then I learned how to take the pig apart from a couple that was brought over here from Austria by these businessmen to do this. Then fast forward to, let's see, it would be about 2010. I wasn't getting along with these businessmen very well because they, well, for whatever reasons, I was on the farm and they were just making phone calls to me. And I finally said, I've had enough of this. Why don't you move your pigs to another facility? They did. The guy that had originally imported the pigs sold me a male and a female. So I got my own breeding stock. And my thought was, this is a great pig, but I didn't want to deal with all the peripheral political and economic issues that they were trying to create, I guess, sort of like an empire around this pig. And
like
I
a
just
multi-level, basically fiefdom.
Yeah, that's what they wanted. They wanted the pigs to go out and then they get a bite of every piglet that hits the ground. That was their thought, and they wanted to run it sort of like a multi-level marketing thing. And I didn't want anything to do with it. I was starting to lose interest in just their business ways. We came to the farm to live a simple life, and I was having to keep company with people that I didn't believe that they knew what they were doing, And so I finally broke off from those guys, and that was a good thing. They went their way, and they created a kind of a business model that is long gone now. They are long gone. They're into other things, or maybe they're not even around. I don't know, but they were quite a bit older than me. So I'm pushing 60 now. So they would probably be in their pushing 80 by now. So that was a long time ago. So anyway, we wound up with breeding stock for this animal. It's a pig that comes out of Hungary. It's Menga Litsa.
Okay.
And it's a heritage breed. It's got characteristics that are quite different than other pigs. It's known as a red-meated pig. So when you look at it, it looks very similar to beef. It's got heavy-duty intermuscular fat and a lot of back fat on it. It's sometimes known as a chuffy pig or a lard-type pig. So it's not very lean, pretty fat. The meat is outstanding. hands down, it's the best pork that I have ever had. They eat anything. They are tough as nails. They'll farrow on their own in the snow and do just fine with it. You don't have to baby them. Yeah, great pig for starters, because they are so adaptable to just about anything. And so we learned quite a bit of things having to do with the Mangalitsa pig. It's highly sought after for a process called charcuterie, which is a curing process. Quite a few people quite a few artisan chefs have gotten into it and created some really neat products. It doesn't really work well with standard pigs. It works really good with these pigs. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why. But we have been in it now since, I guess, 2009. I think that's when we started. So I think we're the longest running family in the United States right now. A lot of people got in. They were sold a notion that it was a silver bullet. And when it didn't pan out to be a silver bullet, they got out. A lot of people get into farming thinking it's like manufacturing or other things that they've done in their life. And farming is definitely the long game. It's definitely a long game. So, we still have the pigs. And I think I would always stay with this breed of pig. We've varied a little bit. We've done a little bit of cross-contaminating with other breeds for different purposes. But that's a process that you go through as a pig producer to bring vigor into your herd. But the Mangalitsa characteristics are very prevalent. They're a hairy pig. And they have a certain look about them. They're not a real friendly pig by any means. They kind of keep their distance, which is nice. We don't want them to be wild or cross or anything, but they kind of move out of your way, which is good. If any of your people have raised standard white pigs, they can really be kind of a pain. They can get a little too close to you and scream at you, and
a little nippy.
They can get old. Yeah, and bite.
Yeah.
We have never had any problems with these pigs as far as being aggressive with any of our children or any of our other pets. So that's really good too, because pigs can be really tough with small humans.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the government decided at one point that your pigs weren't legal. Tell us about that.
Well, this all started in 2011. My wife and I were doing deliveries to one of our restaurants in the Traverse City area, which is north of me about an hour. And it was right around Christmas time. And we went to one of our longtime restaurants, and he says, "Hey, I heard that your pigs are illegal." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, we just got a briefing at the college from the Department of Agriculture that we can no longer buy pigs from producers of Mangalitsa people." And I said, "That's crazy." And he says, "No, they have determined that your pigs are feral." And I said, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. I took vocabulary in high school, and I know what that word means. Pigs can't be feral because they're behind my fences. And a feral animal would be an animal that's in the wild, released or abandoned." And so I questioned that. But the next day I got on the phone and I called the appropriate agency, which happened to be the Department of Natural Resources, and inquired about it. And they said, they weren't very nice. They said, "Yeah, your animals are feral. You got to get rid of them by April 1st, 2012, or, we're going to arrest you. We're going to put you in jail. We're going to fine you $10,000 per animal if you still have it." And let's see, what else were they going to do? And they were going to come on my farm and shoot them. And I was floored by that. I'd never been talked to that way, with such disrespect. And it just reminded me of movies that I've seen of, like, Germany, in 1936. "You will be shot if you don't do what we tell you, and do it now." and slammed the phone on me, because I questioned what they said.
Yeah.
And I kind of was stunned by it. And then I wound up calling my state senator, got one of his lackeys on the phone, and they didn't like the idea of it either, but there's not much you can do because the Department of Natural Resources, you got to do what they say,
Mm-hmm.
And I was only out of the service at that time for, this would have been 2011. So I was out, I got out in 2004. And I just assumed that the civilian world was a kind, gentle place. I didn't think it was, I didn't think it was a tough place. But these people were treating me like I was a prisoner. And here I am, just a farmer. And as things progressed, I started to see that there's a problem here.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm a prisoner, and I'm being treated like I'm less than a U.S. citizen by these people who I've come to know and disrespect as much as anybody can disrespect anybody. But the departments are anything but what should be in America. They're anything but what should be here.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are communist. I think they act like communists. So anyway, the whole thing progressed. We pushed back and said, we're not going to do it. We hired a lawyer, and the lawyer said, well, what has to happen is you have to contest this in court. You have to sue them for clarity, I guess is what.
Mm-hmm.
And so we took, we didn't know. We'd never had a lawyer before. So we said, well, okay. So I think we had maybe $2,500 at the time, total money. And so we had to use that to get the lawyer going. And we figured it would just be, we'd come to an agreement and they'd say, oh yeah, you've got Mangalitsa pigs and you keep them behind fences. Well, of course they're not feral. We thought it would get straightened out very quickly. But, us suing them for clarification was like we had, spit in a Gestapo officer's face. They lashed back at us really bad. And their machine includes the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Attorney General, and then they have a couple of publications that they use in the state capital area. I'm not going to mention them, but they are the kind of like the town newspaper.
Yeah.
And it's bigger publications in the state, and they use them against you immediately if you go up against the machine. And they they slander you and they call you a gun-toting person, and of course, and then everybody gets scared of you because you're a gun person.
Mm-hmm.
I had a newsflash for them, but most of us in the military used guns on a regular basis, but they didn't really understand that. They saw me as a military person. Like, people generally have respect for military people, but the state agencies have less respect for you because you are more likely to question this state and other states too. I was talking to a lady in Ohio yesterday. They rule with fear, absolute fear. They tell you that terrible things will happen to you if you don't comply with their things, their rules and regulations that they make up. So anyway, this went on till 2014. We gained a lot of traction because they're all across America. There was people that are saying, similar things have happened through other agencies, and there's no recourse. I mean, what can you do? You can't sue them because they have an unlimited amount of our tax dollars to fight us with it, and actually not really fight us, to topple us, to pummel us into the ground for daring to question their authority.
Well, it's the bulldozing is what they're doing.
Yeah. So our weapon became numbers of people. And every time there was a hearing, or even if we just said, hey, we need help, people came out of the woodwork to help us. Monetarily, we wound up having 3 lawyers, wound up ditching 2 of them. The last one, I probably should have let her go too. They weren't as helpful as they could have been. And we found out how that all works. Lawyers come in to kind of mediate the situation. But if you're up against Department of Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Attorney General, you're basically up against the state biggest players. And a lawyer going up against them is likely to have a reminder given to them that, you know, you're licensed through the state. So be careful what you do. And so the lawyers are throttled as well. And it's a pretty totalitarian setup. It's pretty totalitarian, and people have figured that out. At the state level, it's like really bad. At the county level, it's worse. At the township level, some of the townships are far worse than anything we've ever seen. Not all of them, you know, because some of the townships, like my township, has solid, decent people that are there to administer, you know, township business. And they're solid, good, decent people. And they would probably jump on a handgun for anybody in my family. But some townships are really bad. And if they had a firing squad, they would use it here in Michigan. And you may be thinking, or your people might be thinking, I'm over exaggerating this. But as we move along with this story, you'll see the threats that they made against me and my family. I think most people would have just quit, because it's kind of a devastating thing. It's been, well, this is 20 and it ended in 15. And I kind of walked away from it and licked my wounds, and just kind of, my head was spinning like, what, I can still live in this state with these people out there? And things did calm down. They put us out of business, so we weren't doing any business. And we were just kind of licking our wounds for a while, trying to figure out what to do next. And but as time's gone by and I've reread the reports, I'm quite angry about that happened to any family in the United States. And as a military member that has taken an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against any enemy, foreign and domestic, I am duty bound to stand up against this and track these people back to where they came from. So when Joel Salatin asked me if I would speak at the Rogue Food Conference, I first had to find out who's rogue here, you know. So I had to talk to them on the phone. Who are you saying's rogue?
Yeah.
And he says, well, you know me. Come on. It's definitely state agencies have gone rogue. And I said, okay, well, I'm in then. And so I went down there and I did speak. And that was where state was driven in the sand. And we're no longer going to just field this nonsense coming from these agencies. They are bureaucrats. Most of them have never really had jobs that produce anything. They're just the parasite class amongst us. And there really isn't that many of them. In the state of Michigan, we have about 500 at the Department of Agriculture. And so it's not that many. And, you know, they have just become, I think they've become what we've allowed them to become. You know, if you have a dog that's behind a chain link fence and people are walking past, that dog gets mean, you know, he barks. But as soon as you open that gate, that dog is likely to run the other way, because he knows that, okay, now it's confrontation time. Maybe I'm not as tough as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as dedicated as I thought I was when there was a fence between us.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is the fence has come down, and the small farmers, big farmers, homesteaders, just regular plain old Americans are grouping up and saying, we don't think that this is right, and we don't think we're going to put up with this. So the offensive has begun, in my opinion, anyway. I may not have a million people behind me. It doesn't matter. I'm going anyway. I'm going on the offensive. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. When your family goes through something like that, you don't want any other families to go through it. And
so
it's
what
not
was
necessary.
what was the end result? Did we be able to keep the pigs? Did you prove to them that they were legal?
Well, I didn't have to prove anything. I just did what the lawyers asked me to do, showed up when I was supposed to show up. But the lawyers knew that we were starting to look at the Constitution of the United States. And we were starting to boil it down to, a Fifth Amendment issue. The Fifth Amendment's really clear. It says that my life, liberty, and property is protected under due process of law. And so these agencies do not make law. They do not make law. And that's the essence of this offensive against them, is you got nothing, because we are a land of laws. We are not we become a land of regulation. But when we pull that broadsword of the Constitution and flash it in their face, most of the time they don't know what to say. And I have a very recent example that I can share with you in a minute of that very thing happening. So in the court, the lawyers knew that we were talking Fifth Amendment, and we're just enough loose guns, like a loose cannon, where my lawyer did not have control of me in the courtroom, and the judge knew he didn't have control, and we had a lot of people in the courtroom that he didn't have control of either. And they were looking at him like, buddy, you're supposed to be protecting the constitutional rights of this individual, and you're protecting the state that wants to keelhaul him for no reason, for not complying with their made-up regulations. So there was a lot of hostility in that room, and there was a lot of people. And that's the key. As I mentioned at the Rogue Food Conference, that is what worked. When you have a lot of bodies there, a lot of people, and they are all unified by the United States Constitution, and they're all on the same page where, hey, this guy's property is being taken because this group of bureaucrats wants to. And we can't have that, because where does that end? That ends in 1937 Germany. That's where it ends if we allow it to happen that way. And from the looks of these people in these state agencies, they would like that, because that gives them the power that they want. They're not producers of products. They're parasites. And so they're trying to gain power and money all the time, and their regulations give them power, which gives them, more rank in their little hierarchies of the Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, and that means more money for them, so they can buy a second home and another Lexus. These people are paid pretty good too. Their budgets are pretty good. So where it wound up was the judge and the Attorney General's office and my lawyer apparently reached an agreement that wasn't run past me, the guy that was actually doing the suing, but the agreement was that they would move for dismissal. In other words, the state asked the judge to please dismiss the case because the state no longer had a problem with me or my animals. And the judge said, oh, well, if you don't have a problem with him, if you're not telling him he's got to get rid of his animals anymore, then there's no case. There's no conflict. Case dismissed. Slam the gavel down. Everybody in the courtroom was like, what? Because we don't live in that environment, so we don't really understand what's going on very well. I certainly didn't. And so with just like that, the case was dismissed, and all of a sudden we were stuck with all the bills for all the lawyers and the lost lost wages, the not the destruction of a family, but it really it worked
the
my
stress.
family over. Yeah.
I can't imagine going through that as a family.
Yeah. And just like that, it was over, and my pigs were all of a sudden okay. So they had spent all this money to come after my family, just one little family that did nothing more than question their authority. It wasn't my pigs that they hated. They hated the thought that I didn't do what they said instantly, because when we first started out, there was a group of people that had come together, and little by little, there was only two of us. And one was a 65-year-old Norwegian from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that you couldn't make him do anything. He was a very tough guy, hockey player, farmer, longtime farmer, very tough guy. And me. And I was, I'm not from here, so I didn't have an inherent fear of these agencies. People from my neighborhood, my extended family, all the people that live in my neighborhood. It's not a neighborhood, but I'd say like the town.
Yeah.
They're all afraid of these agencies, very much so. We didn't have, there's 57 churches in this area, and we had like a light sprinkling of people that came individually from these churches. There were no churches as a body that stood up and supported our family. But that was a big problem to us. We didn't ask them, but that's who they say they are. That there was no help from there. I actually was discussing that with pastor of a church this morning, and he didn't have anything to say about that. Like, well, we were afraid or whatever. They're supposed to, you would think it would be a fine opportunity for them to stand in the gap for a citizen. But there was one group of people out of Midland. It was a Tea Party group, just regular people. And one day they showed up here, the real dark day in December, maybe January. Not much going on here. We hadn't had much of a Christmas, that was for sure. And, everybody was kind of down in the dumps, like, what do we do now? And they showed up, and when they left, I don't think we had the money to pay our electric bill at that point. And when they showed up, there was some money on the table. And then they rallied around us, and most of the Tea Party groups in Michigan rallied around us. And some of the loose, I don't know what you want to call them. I don't want to call them hippies, because sometimes that's taken derogatorily, and I don't mean it that way, but that's how they refer to themselves. So those groups came around us. So there was a unification of peoples. And I think that's why the Attorney General said, hey, we gotta put an end to this. These people are getting organized, and we can't have that. So the case was dropped. And that, just like that, I was not in a lawsuit anymore, and I was supposedly free to do business. But because we had kind of beat them, it wasn't the kind of victory we wanted. Then the Department of Agriculture kind of took over, and they made it their business to go into all of my restaurants, all of my stores, and just very passively intimidate the owners. And they would do it something like this. It wasn't like were going in there with a rubber hose and sitting them down and smacking them around. They would just go in and buy Baker's Green Acres products. They'd put it in a bag and they'd walk out with it. They'd get in their state car and they'd drive away. And that behavior was unique. That had not happened to a store owner before. Or we had a store in the Upper Peninsula, a really cool store. A lot of hippies went in there. And they went in right before lunch. They opened up their briefcases, laptops on his lunch counter. And then they cataloged everything in that store that said Baker's Green Acres on it, put it all back, got in their little cars, and left.
Oh my gosh.
And the kid calls me and he says, "Are you okay? What happened? What's going on?" And I said, "I think I'm okay. Why? But they saw it as two black sedans pulling up in front of their establishment, and people coming in suits with briefcases and laptops, Department of Agriculture, Michigan, and U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they thought that there had been, maybe a murder or something,
Yeah.
But this was just a tactic that they use that's supposed to scare me, but it doesn't. It really, it irritates me because they're punks. That's all they are, is punks. So they did that stuff and finally put all of my stores out, all of my restaurants out. And then the next thing they did was
because it wasn't like they told them to stop selling it. They just intimidated them to the point that they scared them, so they stopped carrying it.
Yeah, because the state agencies have all businesses on thin ice. They scare everybody. They'll come in and they, act the Gestapo agent, black cars, and they have the ability to close the door on that establishment. So if you don't suck up to them, they can close you up. And we've experienced this many times just here on our place with their attitude towards us. If we don't do exactly what they tell us to do, even if it doesn't make sense, and all right, early on, I had an inspector from the USDA here, and I didn't have light covers over the light bulbs in my shop. And I did that intentionally because I was low on money, and it didn't say in the reg that I had to, the regulation. So I didn't. And he said, "You should put covers over those." And I said, "Well, what am I missing? Is that in the regulation? Because I didn't see it." And I was honestly questioning, hey, did I miss that? Because I could have bought them and I could have screwed them over it, but I wasn't going to spend money where I didn't have to at the stage of the game we're at. And he got upset with me and he says, "You listen, I can close this place down. I can put a padlock on that front door if you get smart with me." And here I am coming out of the military, and this guy is like a local yokel. And I'm like, "What are you saying? You're saying that you can close my business down if I don't do what you say?" And he says, "Well, I'll tell you something. It would be a pretty good idea to put those covers on." And I said, "Is this about your good ideas, or is this about the regulations that I'm supposed to follow?" And he got all upset with me. And it turned out that I called his supervisor, who didn't speak English very well. And then I went past him to Food Inspection Safety, FISA, Food Inspection Safety Administration in Wisconsin. And the guy I got on the phone was another veteran. And I told him what happened, and he got really hot. And he said, "Listen, son," he was an old veterinarian, Army type. He says, "You listen here, son, you put my number on speed dial. And if these jerks give you a hard time, you call me. Matter of fact, you call me anyway." And so that put an end to that. But, then they get angry with you, offline, and they want to do things to you offline. I mean, it's really sad. These agencies serve no purpose other than to intimidate. And I mean, it's not about food safety. It has nothing to do with food safety, because they're not there when we're doing our process. They are just there to collect a check and make you comply with some of their foolish rules. So anyway, that was that thing that ended. But that type of thing goes on all the time with other producers, and they, if you say yes to them once and kind of do what they want, then they get emboldened and they'll have you jump through the next hoop and the next hoop. So little story here, after all my restaurants were gone, just a finishing touch from the Department of Agriculture. They had seen a ham that, according to the article in an online magazine, had been produced at Baker's Green Acres. And it was a gift that I gave to one of my chefs, who was a friend of mine. I gave it to him, and it's a hoof-on ham, and it was aged and everything. It was worth quite a bit of money, and he was really reluctant to cut into it because it was so beautiful, and he would hang it in his wine cellar and take it out once in a while and look at it and put it on the counter in the restaurant. And he posed with that ham in an online magazine. Hadn't been cut into, hadn't been served in his restaurant. And the online magazine was forwarded to the Michigan Department of Agriculture by somebody.
Oh boy.
And then it was forwarded to the United States Department of Agriculture and the Health Department. And sure enough, they generated a search warrant to come to my property and search my buildings, my records, which means they take your phones, they take your computer, and my vehicles. And so they showed up on the 17th of December, 2017, with 2 state patrol cars, 3 state patrolmen, and 2 agency people like Department of Ag and U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they come with this warrant, and they wanted to do all this stuff. They had a bunch of cars waiting downtown to follow them in.
So
and they were going to take my farm apart. They were going to.
If you've been enjoying this episode so far, you're going to want to head over to growingfarmers.com/free resources and download our free resource bundle to help you shave hours off your week and become a thriving farmer. It includes resources such as our 10 winter growing secrets we wish we knew when we started, which is a ebook which talks about the tips and techniques to get better growth in your winter production. We teach things like the simple but counterintuitive principle that trips up most beginning growers, the shape and size of tunnels that are best for winter production, how to prepare beds so they are weed-free and get beautiful, lush stands of crops, what to do about pests like aphids, voles, and slugs, how to fast-track your research to fine-tune your production for your microclimate, and how to pack in more crops for higher yields and profits. So head over to growingfarmers.com/free resources and download your free resource bundle today. So what was the warrant for? Because, I mean, they saw a ham.
Yeah. They wanted to determine whether that ham was produced at a USDA facility or here at Baker's Green Acres. And to date, we have not revealed where it was processed, and I'm not going to. It's my secret, right?
Yeah.
My wife knows, but you can't get it out of her either. So instead of them getting on the phone and calling me and saying, hey, they had to go through the dramatics, upsetting my neighbors, my children, with this type of thing. That's what they're doing. Now, I don't want your listeners to say, whoa, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm not getting into farming. I'm here to tell you people that the way you deal with terrorism is you run straight at it. Now, what were they trying to do? Were they trying to uncover a sinister drug ring that was, hurting America? No, they were trying to intimidate me or terrorize me. They were trying to scare me to the point where I'd say, the hell with this, I'm going to do something else. That's their goal. Right? What we have to do as a body of people that are interested in, a sustainable way of life or gardening or food production, or, we like to can, or we like to be self-sufficient, do stuff. As a body, we have to do more of it and do it right in their face. So many of us do it that they can't intimidate us. And then be prepared for when that happens, Joel said we should be nice to them, and I disagreed. I don't think we should be nice to them. I don't think we should cooperate with them at all. I don't think we should make them feel comfortable, driving our roads or anything else. We're producing food for our families,
Mm-hmm.
Are
And we know
they,
it's the best quality food that anyone can get.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's the best we can produce. So we really have to ask the question, why are they doing this? What is their agenda for doing this? And this is where it gets kind of hairy. This is where we lose people, because Americans are good people.
Mm-hmm.
I've been all over the world, and there are bad people. There are countries that are full of bad people, corrupt civilizations. Even the nicest little old lady you ever saw, if you forgot your wallet, she would steal it. That's just, we're not a corrupt people. We have a tendency, if somebody is in need on the side of the road, to stop and help them. Overall, that's who we are as a people as Americans. So we are good people. So it's hard for us to wrap our head around evil, around pure evil. So I'm sure people have heard the name Joseph Stalin before.
Mm-hmm.
He killed a lot of people, and he killed millions and millions and millions of people by starving them to death.
Mm-hmm.
So he got control of agriculture, centralized it, and then when the time was right, took the food away from the people that were resisting him.
Mm-hmm.
And he starved them right to death. Pure evil. I mean, he would have shot them all if he could have.
Yeah, it was cheaper to starve them.
It's way cheaper to starve them. So when you look at these factions, and I don't want to just say the U.S. government, because it's not the U.S. government. The U.S. government is made up of us,
Mm-hmm.
but the departments, all right, they are private corporations, and they act as contractors that our duly elected government hires to get a job done. Now, when the Department of Ag started, their purview was to track and maintain food production, so we know if we're going to have enough or not going to have enough. We have to make sure that we're fed. But they've
Mm-hmm.
become so much more, and they've become a tool, actually, of I would say
Well,
I don't want to say even anti-American. It's anti-humanity. They should be blessing my efforts to produce good food for my family and my friends, but instead they're condemning my efforts. Now you have factory farming that's polluting the countryside. It's making people sick because that food's not good. People that work there are getting sick. A lot of bad comes from it, and they bless that. They say, "Oh, this is good," but this little farmer over here that's feeding his neighbors and his family good quality food, that's bad. So it's gotten turned around. It's 180 degrees from where it should. And I think most Americans kind of scratch their head and they say, well, this sure is screwed up. Well, it's really not. It's intentional. That is their intention to do that.
Mm.
They want to centralize the food so they control it. And you might think, well, it's just a business decision. No, it's more than that, because the Department of Agriculture is in a position to say, this doesn't look good. This is not food security. This is not safe to do this. But they don't. They claim to be the brightest amongst us. They claim to be the scientists. They're always quoting science. Why are they letting this happen? Why are these deadly chemicals being spread all over our fruited plain the way they are allowing it? It's by design. And
recommending it.
Oh yeah, they recommend it. As a matter of fact, they look down on organic farmers like we just smoke dope all day long, which I actually don't use marijuana. It's not that I'm totally against it. I got friends that do. It's legal in this state. And it's part of their culture. I have a lot of hippie friends, but it's just not my thing.
Hmm. So
So,
they showed up at your farm. They're standing there. What happens next?
um, my kids were afraid. They pulled in really fast, like it was a drug bust, like they were about to come out and cuff me.
Hmm.
And it was definitely meant to intimidate me. But I've seen this movie before, so it really irritated me. And so I went over and I had a word with the state policeman, which one of them had been a Marine. And so I picked that out right away. And we immediately got a rapport going. And
Hmm.
I asked him if he knew why he was here. And he says, well, no, not really. I was detailed over here.
Hmm.
Um, and I said, look, I'm an Air Force retiree. I am farming this place. These people are using you to intimidate me, and you can obviously see it. I'm not intimidated by you. I've been under arms my whole life, and I'm not intimidated here. And he says, well, we're just trying to make sure everybody stays safe. And I said, yeah, I get that, but you're being pimped by
Mm.
this Department of Agriculture. And their whole demeanor changed. He was like, are you any threat to these people? I said, not at all. I mean, I haven't been in a fist fight since high school. I've
Yeah.
never raised a hand to these people. I've never even raised my voice to them. I just won't do what they tell me to do because it's not per my constitutional rights. And they have a real hard time with it. Now, the two people that were here, if you looked at them, um, you might think that they maybe were the cleaning crew at Walmart. And that's pretty cruel right there. But they didn't look like upstanding citizenry, and they were the food inspectors delivering this search warrant.
Yeah.
Actually, the number one lady in this whole thing, her name is Laurel Sorensen. She's long gone now, but the inside of her car looked like somebody dumped a trash bin inside of it. I'm not kidding. There was orange peels in it. And it had been like that for years in all the time that I had known her as an inspector. And I really had a hard time taking her seriously. But yet here they were to take my records, take it back to the forensic laboratory and go through it to see if I'd been making any bootleg hams. And yeah, it was pretty ridiculous, but it was real. I mean, they could execute this search warrant, and they had a judge's signature on it. So I didn't really know what to do. That was the first time of that happening, and I just stalled him as much as I could, and I wouldn't let them get back in their cars. And I took their ID cards off of them, their driver's license off of them. I made them give it. And that's the thing. We as farmers have to know what tools can we use
Hmm.
to give us a little time to think, because they want to come here and rush you into a room for your safety, and then go through your belongings, and they want to do it really quick, and then get what they want, which I'm not sure what they wanted exactly, but they wanted something that they could use on me legally,
Hmm.
and they want to make it happen really quick and get out without any kind of confrontation. And as
Hmm.
farmers, we can't allow that. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to resist a lot. You have to resist as much as you possibly can, just the side of doing something illegal. I mean, you can't assault them. You can't throw things at them. You can't do any of that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. But what you can do, and I think we're going to go through this at the Rogue Food Conference. We need to have like workshops. We break out and do role
Hmm.
playing from those of us that have gone through it, sort of like a fire drill. So
Hmm.
when a bad thing happens, you know what to do. So you're not you don't spaz out.
Yeah.
And now me, I got really upset. I got really angry, and I'm used to functioning in that mode. Military is kind of a confrontational group of people, so that's why we don't play so good with the civilian people.
Mm.
And so I got really angry, and I was able to function, but I didn't let them come in the house. You never let them come in your house. and I didn't let them get back in their cars, and I wouldn't let them leave, actually, because I had their ID cards in my pocket, their driver's licenses. And so I said, no, you're going to wait. I'm not saying you can't do your search, but you're going to wait until my friends get here. And we had a pretty good recall roster where I only had to call one person, and that person would call, 5 people, and those 5 would call 5. So we could have a bunch of people here really quickly. And that is the best weapon. They hate that because they never know what's going to happen. And these are bureaucrats we're talking. These are people that make, between $14 and $18 per hour to be a Department of Ag weenie. And they come to work on Monday and they can't wait till Friday. They're not dedicated to that department. They just want the paycheck and, to be left alone. So if you give them some resistance, and especially if it's resistance that could result in legal bills for them, or additional paperwork for them, or possibly being detained. Like they want to go home at the end of the day, right? They got no problem with coming on my farm at 9 o'clock in the morning when I have work to do. This is my work day. This is my business. This is how I feed so they don't have any problem detaining me. But when I'm going to make them work over a couple hours, they don't want anything to do with that. So a little bit of resistance goes a long way with them. And we made them stand in the cold until our friends got here. And finally, they just said, we're leaving. And I went back over to the state police and I said, look, I didn't tell them they couldn't do it. And the policeman says, yeah, I know. I was right there. And then he says, what are you going to do with their driver's licenses? And I said, can I give them to you? And he says, well, I guess so. He says, I hadn't seen that before. That was choice. And it circulated with the state police that they were being used as, this intimidating force. And that's not who our state police are supposed to be. They are our sheepdog. They are the people you run to when something bad has happened on a roadway, or a child is lost, or, I had a thing happen when I was a kid where a policeman, he wasn't a state policeman, had been a state policeman, but he was a local cop. He peeled his stuff off. He peeled all of his gun belt and whatever else he could get off, handed it to about a 9-year-old kid, and then dove in to a lake to get a kid that was stuck under the dock out, and certainly would have died if that man wasn't there. That is who our state policemen are. But when we allow these agencies like the Department of Agriculture to use them as, Guido from the hood, it's totally incorrect. And I mean, it just shows you where the agencies have gone. They're trying to be authoritarian in the lives of American citizens. And, we've allowed it. All right. We've allowed it because, when we start talking Constitution, people are like, what Constitution? Does that even apply anymore? Well, according to the lawmakers and their blatant disregard of the oath that they've taken, you would think that it doesn't. But it is our responsibility as citizenry to know that Constitution and utilize it. And I can give you a great example. This is great. This just happened. If your people that listen to this want to, they can go to Facebook, Anyone Can Farm Tribe.
Okay. And
ask to join. We'll let them in. And then start reading what happened last week. Okay, last week, a farm that we're friendly with, and I'd say we're kind of mentors for them. They're younger than us, and we've helped them, and they're about 50 miles away. And the wife calls, and she says, hey, the Department of Ag was here. They rolled in the driveway and they wanted to come in the house, and they asked me a bunch of questions and da-da-da-da-da. She says, but I just told them that I couldn't talk to them and that they'd have to come back later. And so she gave up some information. But she drew more information out of them than she gave up.
Mm-hmm.
So the information that they gave her was there'd been an anonymous complaint that they were selling pork products and milk. And so here comes the black cars up the driveway and the Gestapo agents, and they can't have any of that. And they scared her. They scared her pretty good. She's about 25. Got little kids behind her. Her husband's at work. That's one of their tactics. They usually wait until the males are gone. And so she called me, and I said, well, you did a good job. You should have probably just said, no, thank you. You'll have to leave, and left it there. But here's what we want to review. Let's just go through the Bill of Rights of the Constitution and see where you lived up to it and where you didn't, and what you can do from here. So pretty easy. The Fourth Amendment says that they can't be on your property unless you've committed a crime, you invite them, or they have a warrant. None of those things had happened. There's no crime in food world. The Fifth Amendment says that your life, liberty, and property is protected under due process of law. That's it. That's it right there. You know, if you want to sell a pork chop, unless there's a law against selling pork chops, get off my property. They have their regulations, but their regulations don't quite line up with my Constitution. So I'm not going to play by their rules. And then the Sixth Amendment says that you have the right to face your accuser. So an anonymous complaint is a non-complaint. It has to have a name and a face with it. And that name and face has to be disclosed to the person who's being complained against. You know, it could have been a crazy person from the insane asylum that called it in. You know, if somebody calls in that so-and-so is doing human sacrifice, are they going to send a SWAT team out there? No, they don't. You have to give your name, or they're not going to move on it. They don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
But apparently the Department of Ag does, because they have another agenda. It just is an excuse for them to do this. So she called me. I made a video. I put it up on the tribe of what had happened. A bunch of people chimed in. Hey, we're here if you need us. Anything we can do to help. Where's this farm? We gave the coordinates of the farm and everything. And then come Monday, Department of Ag was going to move against them, probably. You know, and their MO is they come and they like to try and take your stuff that they think is involved with the production of raw milk. If you let them, they'll take it. And then they like to take products out of freezers, or put a piece of tape over the freezer until the investigation is complete, right?
Yeah.
And this scares people, right? Like John talked about that at the conference, right? So that probably was going to happen. But because we put this up on the tribe and so many people said, hey, I'm going to be there if something goes down, they sent an email saying that the investigation has been closed. Have a nice day. So what worked? What worked in that whole scenario? I'll tell you what worked. The gal was informed of what her rights were. She did not allow them to come in and gather a bunch of information from her. She told them they had to leave. And then we came together and said, okay, if you guys are going to show up, we're going to show up.
Yeah.
And we're not going to make this fun for you. I mean, the Department of Ag people a lot of times say, hey, I'm just doing my job. Well, now is the time for us as tribes people, anyone can farm people, small farmers, whatever, to say, I'm just doing my job. Because my job really is to protect and defend the constitutional rights of the citizenry here. And as I said at the conference, I'll be damned if I let these people walk over innocent citizens saying they're just doing their job. So it was squelched right there. So it worked. So Joel was saying at the conference, have a lot of respect for Joel. Joel has been out in front ever since I got into this, saying, this is what's going to happen. This is what we need to do. And he's been right every time.
Yeah.
And he's been right every time. He's right. And I'm not saying he's infallible, but so far he's been pretty good. And so if he decided that this was the time to go and do a rogue food conference, then this is the time. And I think once these agencies start backing up, I don't think they're gonna get a toehold again. And it's time. I mean, we're American citizens, we're free people, and we're letting these agencies destroy our freedom. And I want my kids to live in a free country. I don't want them to have, food Gestapo coming up the driveway because they want to butcher a chicken or gather some eggs. And the ridiculous stories that you've heard about kids putting a lemonade stand out in front of their home, and then they are forced to shut it down by the Department of Health or something, is so off the charts. Those people that do that, they need to be thwarted and throttled very hard, and they need to be re-blued. They need to be reminded of what the Constitution says and what the nature of free people is. This licensing that's going on in the States right now, telling me that I need a license to do stuff that I've been able to do forever, and now all of a sudden, because you can get money out of me, you want to license it. That's got to end too. And I think that there's powers at hand that are working that. But for now, us, the citizens, pushing back is what we must do. And I would say, quit the asking for permission thing. Quit doing that and just go through your process, check and see if what you want to do lines up with your Constitution, which is not hard. The Bill of Rights of the Constitution is a single page, easy to read through. You should read through it daily, I think. Brush your teeth with it so it's in you. And then live your life by that. And when the regulators come along, which, they're just people that are going by the Department of Ag handbook instead of the Constitution. You have to remind them what the Constitution says and bring them into compliance with the Constitution. Oh, one other thing, that young gal that went through that problem, it's called the 1801 farm. It's in Frankfort, Michigan.
Okay.
When they went through that, I reminded her, per the Sixth Amendment, that she has the right to face her accuser. So when it was all over, Tuesday, she got somebody to look after her kids, hung her tomahawk on her belt, and went down to the health department to find out who lodged the complaint. And she brought the Sixth Amendment with her and put it right in the face of the lady at the counter and very nicely said, "You have to give me that complaint." Oh, no, it's anonymous. No. Per the law, and this Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Per this law, you must provide me with that information. And that lady was like, "Well, I better call my supervisor." And the supervisor's like, "Well, I don't know, I better call the sheriff." And it caused a chain reaction of people going to the Sixth Amendment and reading it and then questioning, do I have to follow the Sixth Amendment? Well, you're a public servant. You took an oath to protect and defend that. Of course you have to. Of course you have to follow that. And they handed her the complaint form, but it was incomplete. And she said, "This is not going to work." and she still got her tomahawk hanging from her belt, and her tomahawk is her Constitution. Yeah. She's saying, "This ain't going to work, and I'm not leaving until you do what you promised to do before God and country when you took that oath to the Constitution. Now I want it." And her husband's involved now, and the tribe is involved. And when you get a bunch of angry people from the tribe saying, "Hey, so-and-so at the Frankfurt Health Department doesn't seem to want to do her job," and then the phone calls start happening, urging her to do her job, that's public pressure, and that's fine. We need to do that stuff. And then maybe they'll be forced, Department of Ag will be forced to say, "Well, there really wasn't a complaint. We lied about that." And okay, well then you need to be fired from the Department of Ag. Go look for another job if you're a liar on the job. But even worse than that, if you're trying to manipulate the citizenry under what's called the color of law. Like you say, hey, it's the law, you got to do this. As a public servant, you're supposed to know the law. That's illegal. There are statutes against that in Michigan, and you can be held accountable for that. So it's far from over. I mean, they want to kind of think it's over, but it's far from over. People are going to be held accountable for this, and I don't, we're not going to do it through the courts. We have to do it through public pressure, and that's where the tribe comes in. The tribe can do that. And I can tell you a couple other things that have happened where the tribes intervened, and when their phones start ringing off the hook, they get worried, and they live in this community too. So they're like, hey, we better do what's right here. I get my paycheck, and I have my friends in town. I don't want everybody in town to hate me because I've trounced on, and when we explain it via the tribe, we explain it to a large amount of people. Look, this is what happened. People are like, that's not right. That's not fair. And they see themselves as possibly on the receiving end of that behavior. And there's no reason for that in our society. There really isn't. If we all just live by our Constitution, we can all do well. But the parasite class won't do so well because they're parasites. And maybe they need to come work for us instead of work for these government agencies. I could show them how to pull weeds. Maybe they'll be able to handle it.
So you're also moving into doing more education, which is amazing because so many farms need that. What do you see some of the biggest mistakes when these farms get started they're making? And obviously one of them would be you need to know what your rights are.
Yeah, that's a big one. Probably the mindset of people is wrong. So I recommend that people keep their day job. You want to have a farm and live happily ever after. Start out with a homestead, and even if you just live on an acre or half acre or something like that, start with what you have. Little greenhouse, maybe some chickens, maybe a garden. Start with what you have. Just like right now, we're growing stuff in the house. We're sprouting stuff in the house that we just learned how to do. And again, we learned that on the tribe just last week, and I had to do it. I thought it was so cool because you can, it's a good way to eat healthy by eating sprouts. So start with what you have, and as your passion grows, upgrade your facilities and maybe move to a little bit bigger piece of property that you can do other things. And don't go to the township to ask what your rights are. Go to the Constitution to find out what your rights are, because the township a lot of times will say, we don't want any gardens in the front yard. Well, maybe you don't. I'm sorry to hear that, but under the Fifth Amendment, I can have a garden on my property and grow tomatoes or anything else I want, so long as it's not on the controlled roster list, and so long as it's not illegal. So the townships have a tendency to say things that they shouldn't, but they don't know any better. It's Aunt B and Floyd and, Goober from the gas station. They get together and they're going to run the town, right? And they don't know any better a lot of times. And sometimes you have to educate them. No, I'm a U.S. citizen, and this Constitution here is the supreme law of the land. And under the Fifth Amendment, I can actually do this, and you can't do a damn thing. So you try to stay out of confrontation with them, but sometimes you have to kind of bring them in line. And it's catchy. When people start understanding the Constitution, it really gets catchy because like the thing with facing your accuser, we've really been taught to believe that, if somebody wants to accuse you of child abuse, that's a good thing that they've, and it's for the safety of the children. No, wait a minute.
It's coercion.
An accusation of child abuse can ruin your professional work life. And so some nutcase can do that, or somebody that doesn't like you can do that. So really, there is no such thing as an anonymous, unless you allow it,
Mhm.
unless you allow it as a citizen. And we'll see how that plays out. But this gal at 1801 Farm, once she learned how to handle that tomahawk, she is ravenous.
Mhm.
So so we're teaching skills because these are skills that probably would have been passed on to us from our fathers and grandparents. Shouldn't say just fathers, but like canning and beekeeping and butchering and preserving meat, gardening, greenhousing, animal husbandry. Those are all skills that need to be taught. You don't just get them. They're not a given. Building fences is not a given. And if you can't keep you're going to work your day job and your animals don't stay where you want them, you won't be doing it very long because you'll get frustrated and want to quit. So, the basic skills need to be communicated to people. And it started with us because I was getting phone calls constantly. Like, how do I do this? And people stopping by, can you show me how to do this? And I'm willing to do it, but it was cutting into my operation. And so we said, how can we do this, still provide this information to people, but not getting hour-long phone calls that were cutting into what we're doing, when you're calving or, you're castrating pigs and somebody wants to, can you tell me how to do this? So that was when YouTube started coming around, and a friend of mine was really good at it. And he says, hey, you can make a video, you post it on YouTube, and then you just tell people, hey, go look at this YouTube video. Thanks. Have a nice day. So I started doing that. And the Baker's Green Acres YouTube channel was born. And it's got a whole bunch of videos of how to do stuff. And I try to communicate attitude as well towards farming, and what it really is, not what you think it is, because it really is a rich way of life. And there's obstacles, and when you overcome those obstacles, instead of letting them be a roadblock, there's a victorious feeling, and it's a good thing. It makes you feel empowered. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. I recommend it. So we teach that. We do the Anyone Can Farm classes that we do on the farm, and we go to other people's farms and we do them too. And I kind of think that's the direction that we'll be heading more into as we kind of back away from commercial farming. And I'm backed away from commercial farming just because of the Department of Agriculture. That's it. I mean, I would still be servicing my restaurants and stores and stuff if it weren't for them. But what they did is they forced me out of that business, and it forced me to do business with just mothers and families, and it empowered me, because when I sell my stuff to a store, the people who eat it don't even know who I am. But when I sell it to a mother of, several children and stuff, and she's procuring food for her children, now I can draw on her energy if I need it. Like, she will defend me like a mother bear to the death.
Yeah.
Where the store won't, or the restaurant won't, because they're scared. But mothers are not scared. Mothers are bears. They're ferocious beings when it comes to their kids. So it empowered me. Like, I can tell the truth about the Department of Ag all day long, and they can't do anything to me. Because I don't have a license with them. I don't rely on them for anything, so I can tell the truth about them. But when I was licensed with them, if I was to tell the truth about who they are, what they're about, they could take my license away. And they lead you to believe that without a license, you can't do business in the state, which is completely incorrect. You just can't do business with other people that hold licenses from them.
Mm-hmm.
So constitutionally, I can do business with my neighbors. I can do business with even people that aren't my neighbors, just citizen to citizen. And they don't have the authority to step in between there. They like to think they do, and they'd love to. They'd love to have it, but they don't per the Constitution.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Yes. Okay. Because that's the big one. And people are like, well, how can I do it? As long as you don't also have a license. So that's why the restaurants can't, because they have a license from the state to operate.
right. Yeah, a good way to understand that, and it takes a while to understand it, but when they say you need a license to sell to restaurants, they're saying to you that we will give you the license, we will sell you the license, but you got to sign on the bottom line. So what you're doing is you're entering a contract. And when you enter that contract, you just said goodbye to your constitutional rights. You just voluntarily superseded your constitutional rights. You did it to yourself, and you didn't have to. They coerce you into thinking that you must, but you don't. So it's sort of like if you go into, let's say, a store, like say, I like going in Tractor Supply. So let's say you go in Tractor Supply and you have the right to free speech. You can say whatever. You can say any word there is, and under the First Amendment, you can say anything you want. I'm not saying that you can go and you can't yell fire on an airplane. You can't yell there's a bomb on an airplane if there's not. You can't do that because that's something different. But you can say, I don't like redheaded people. You can say, people with the name John suck. You can do all that. And, they would have you to believe that, well, if it's hurtful, you can't do it. It's hate speech. That's made up. That's not true. Okay, but you go into Tractor Supply and you start using bad language in there. They could say to you, sir, you're going to have to leave. You could say, well, I got the constitutional right to use bad language. And they would say, not in here, you don't. Because this is private. It's a private store.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would have the authority to say, you can go out in the parking lot and use that language if you, or out of the parking lot probably, and use that language if you like. But you cannot in here.
Mm-hmm.
They're a corporation. They have corporate rules. So the Department of Agriculture is a corporation, and they have corporate rules. They even have a corporate handbook. So their employees have to read the handbook, and they have to sign on the dotted line. So their employees have a contract with their employer, Department of Ag. But they're also required, because they're a contractor of the state, they're required to take an oath to the Constitution. So that's where they get themselves between a rock and a hard place.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for the chink in the armor of the Department of Agriculture, it's the employees. That's where the chink is, because they actually, per their employer, take an oath to protect and defend my constitutional rights.
Mm-hmm.
And if I call them on it, and let's say I start legal action against them because they have not respected my constitutional rights, let's say I do that, then they will probably go running to their employer, the department, and say, hey, this guy's suing me. And the department will say, for what? Well, he says I violated his constitutional rights. And the department will say, you shouldn't have done that. See, because they swore an oath not to. So the department is it's a wily rabbit, and they're kind of all over the place. But we, the people, have the key to that. We have the tomahawk to use, and that is our Constitution. The fact that they took an oath to protect and defend our Constitution, but yet they supersede it by going to their corporate handbook. So if I'm a farm and I wish to remain autonomous or sovereign, or not attached to any other corporation, just don't get in any agreements with them. And raw milk is a real hot button target because the milk industry is dying on the vine, and they have for 20 years. So they're really pushing regulators to go after people that sell milk. And they've got all kinds of intimidation techniques, right?
Yeah.
Raw milk, like if I had a pint of raw milk in my pocket and the cops frisked me, would they say, "Oh, we got you now, man. Here's the raw milk. You got raw milk on you. You're in possession of raw milk"? No, they wouldn't. They'd say, "What is this? Raw milk? Oh, it's nothing."
Yeah.
But they try to make you think that, well, if you sell it though, you're in big trouble. And people, I had a lady last night, a lady from a publication, actually. She says, "Well, I don't want to get thrown in jail." I said, "Lady, you think you're going to get thrown in jail you have to violate a law to get thrown in jail. Milk? Come on. You've let them make you believe you've allowed them to change your perception of reality by thinking that raw milk can get you thrown in jail." And then she says, "Well, what about that guy?" And there's a Amish guy that got thrown in jail for violating some FDA thing with some salve that he made. I said, that's not raw milk. That's different. And that's a totally different scenario. A lot of times people wind up, something's going on in your farm that started with raw milk, and then you break somebody's nose and you wind up in jail. Well, the powers that be like to say, well, in the course of a raw milk raid, so-and-so was arrested and is now serving, this time in jail. You're serving time in jail because you punched this guy in the nose, not because of the raw milk,
Yeah. Yeah.
But they try to make it look like raw milk. And you got to ask yourself, who would benefit from that pressure being put on citizens not to produce raw milk?
Yeah.
So who benefits from that? Well, I don't think I have to tell you that. I think you people probably know. But as Joel said at the conference, and he said this to me a long time ago, I'd much rather milk 10 cows and sell the milk and make a good living than go to work in town and have to deal with people and their ways. But we're prevented from doing that because of this regulation. And the problem really is we haven't pushed back hard enough, or we haven't just done it and let them take your best shot, because they got no shot. They got no shot.
Well, I think it all started when the USDA told us that we couldn't sell direct to retail, or we should be selling to wholesale. And then what happened is, because their margins were so thin, farmers were always trying just to make enough. And when farmers are just trying to make enough, they don't have enough time to go look at the actual rules and regulations. And they don't have that margin. If you look at people that have built themselves some level of wealth, they are the ones that have the time and effort to go see how to pay less taxes. And they frequently are able to do that because they go figure that out. But I think the government has put these farmers under their thumb by giving them all these, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And when they're doing it, they're so poor and they're so strapped, they don't have time to actually do what they should or should not be doing.
I would agree. And also, too, a lot of times if let's say that you want the lifestyle of a guy that milks a few cows, maybe you see videos of that and you say, I want to do that. But then you think, well, I don't want to get in trouble. I guess I'll ask the Department of Agriculture how to proceed. Well, they're going to funnel you. They're going to sway you into their sales funnel. And they really try to get you to enter into a contract with them, which basically gives them the final say on your process. So, I guess I said this at the conference, but I think this is pretty profound, because I still hear this a lot in just daily newscasts and stuff. The younger people say this. They have this term fascism. They have this term kind of mixed up with like anything evil. It's fascist. It's Nazi-esque, or it's, but really what fascism is, and people, you're welcome to look it up. It is privately owned, government run. Privately owned, government run. So I own my I own my farm. My process is mine. I thought it up. I'm executing it. And then the Department of Ag comes in and says, yeah, but you need to have a license from us. If I get the license, then they have the final say on how I do my process. So it's, in essence, it is government run at that point. But is it because they're evil? No, it's because I'm ignorant of reality. And I could say, no, thank you. Or I could even say to them, hey, well, if I get this license, what do I get for it? You know, what are the perks of this? You know, like if Guido from the block comes down and says, hey, you got to pay protection money to me if you want to have a storefront on my road here. And you say to Guido, well, what's in it for me? And he says, well, you won't get broken legs. Oh, yeah. I see. You know, that's basically what they're saying. They're saying, if you don't get a license from us, you can't do business on our corner. And you can't do business with the rest of our people. That's what they're saying. And, you know, it's racketeering, really, if you get right down to it. It is racketeering, but they do it and they say, well, this is for safety. I mean, we're concerned with the safety of the children and all that stuff. But people should know that that's just a ruse. It's not even a good ruse anymore, because every time there's some sort of outbreak and a bunch of hamburger or spinach or anything else gets recalled and people die, it's always under their guidance. So I figure if they want to be fascist and they want to control these farms and have the final say, then they should provide the lawyers when those companies are going to get sued for killing people. But they don't see it that way. They want control, but they don't want any of the downside of that. You know?
The responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thanks so much for your time today. One final question before you go. If you could pick one, what would be your favorite farming tool?
Probably my tractor.
Okay. What kind of tractor do you have?
I just have a small John Deere 50 horsepower, 40-year-old tractor. It's
nice.
2-wheel drive. Probably after that, you probably meant like a hand tool. After that, it would probably be my Leatherman. Okay.
What kind of Leatherman do you have?
I carry a Leatherman Surge.
Okay, the Surge.
Yep, have for many years. I actually have 2 of them, so when one breaks, I can send it in, and I won't be without it. I can't be without it.
Yes, I used to have the Wave, and then I went to the Crunch, and I love the Crunch because of the locking pliers.
Yeah. I'll have to look at that.
Definitely check that one out. So
I had it on me when I was giving that presentation at the Road Food Conference. I can't seem to go any place without it.
And where can people find out more about you and your work?
We have a Facebook page that's Baker's Green Acres.
Okay.
That's a good one. My wife puts blogs up on there, and there's lots of pictures, and that's where we used to do most of our selling from. Still do a little bit. People can still order whole animals from us and stuff. And the class schedule is there for anyone can farm.
Okay, very cool.
The other thing that's probably getting pretty exciting right now is the Anyone Can Farm Tribe on Facebook. And that's a membership deal. I mean, we have to approve you. It doesn't cost you anything, but we got to do a intense vetting process before we let you in. Just kidding. We don't do that. It's just that if somebody complains, I don't like you guys butchering on, we can kick you out.
Yeah.
And to go with that, that is like a gathering of like-minded people that are into these processes that we do. Yeah. And then to go with that, we do a Wednesday night call-in show where people can call in via YouTube, Baker's Green Acres YouTube.
Okay.
And it's me and my wife. She mans the laptop, and I'm in front of the camera, and we just take questions. Sometimes I rant. And we just have really cool conversations on there. It's supposed to be an hour, but now it's it's gone an hour 15, hour 30, and last night it was 2:15, 2 hours and
wow.
15. And the only reason why it didn't keep going is because my wife likes to go to bed at 10 o'clock, and she was giving me the
Stink eye.
The stink eye, right? Yeah. So the way we're going to do it is she's going to stay with me for 50 minutes.
Yep.
And then she's going to cut out, and then it will be just me.
Okay.
And I can go as long as I want. And so we'd love if people would come to that. And we'd love if people saw this as a means to an end. You know, if we have an organization that is really big, there's a lot of strength in numbers. Nobody gets anything out of it really except FaceTime, you know.
Yeah.
And you get to talk. What I'd like to do is I'd like it if when people, instead of having to type in their question, if their face could pop up and then they could just enunciate their question, and then them and me would have a quick conversation, and then the next person could come.
Yeah.
I would really like that. I don't know if that technology exists yet.
It does. And actually, after I can send you some links afterwards that might be able to what you're looking for.
Okay.
So
outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
All right. Well, again, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And we will make sure we put these links in the show notes so people can find you real easily.
Excellent.
Hey, Thriving Farmers. Next week on the podcast, we have a super amazing guest, John Kempf. John is the founder of Advancing Eco-Agriculture, a plant nutrition and biostimulants consulting company. In this very long episode, we go over all things regenerative and building soil and healing soil and just producing nutrient-dense food. So it's going to be a fun episode. Can't wait to share it with you, and make sure you join in next week. So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.